a fountain, because I have, I made one that I just got a 5-gallon jug and
You're ready. I'm ready to go.
my girls make a mess of it.
Good evening. I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, November 14th, 2017, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting at Casco Bay High School in room 200. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Seeliger,
I'll wake up and think of
Here?
Ms. Vandell,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Thompson,
Here.
Ms. Morioni,
Here?
Mr. Eater,
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Presente.
I was gonna
Ms.
say
Donato,
birthday.
Ms. Farah, Ms. Yuri,
Here.
and Chair Trevorrow.
Here. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the report of the chair this evening, I have a couple of items to report. First, I wanted to mention that Ms. Morioni is now serving as our representative to the General Advisory Council to PATHS. This is a regional governance committee for career and technical education, and our board has not always had a representative in the past, so we are very thankful to Ms. Morioni for volunteering in that capacity. Did you have anything about that you wanted to add, Ms. Morioni? Sorry to put you on the spot.
This is live, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. I did not make any notes for tonight, but I would say I'm happy to be a representative there for representing the board. And unfortunately, it's been several weeks since our meeting, and it's not coming to mind what we talked about. But it's great to see all of the representatives that are in that group are all from the surrounding districts, and included school board member representation as well as superintendendents and counselors.
Principals.
Excuse me, principals. Yeah, there were no counselors. I didn't say counselor there, but maybe from other districts there were. It was a great, engaging conversation, but I very much apologize I didn't prepare anything to say about it. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for
I'll prepare
serving.
more next time.
I also wanted to let the public know that the board has completed its annual evaluation of the superintendent. This was conducted over a series of executive sessions that took place over August, September, and October. And I'm pleased to report that the board had a very positive overall performance assessment. And we are happy to be welcoming Mr. Botana to his second year as our superintendent.
Yay.
That's how I felt.
It's like, oh, yay.
And to let board members know, our next meeting on November 28th is the straw poll, which is the non-binding annual vote for election of the chair to serve the next year. I wanted to just go over a couple of process items in how that happens. We did include the policy election of chair BDBR in your packet, but just because the process is slightly different from our normal motion process that we use, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. The first is that the members-elect will replace the outgoing members at the table, and the chair will open for nominations. No second is required for nominations, unlike motions at this meeting. And any nominee has an opportunity to make an oral statement not to exceed 5 minutes. And when voting happens, it is by voice vote. So rather than by a show of hands, we'll be calling each member to state their choice. And the last thing I wanted to remind board members is that Monday, the 20th, is the State of the Schools address at City Hall during the council meeting at 5 o'clock. So we hope to see you there. And that concludes the chair's report. Moving on to report of the students. We have Casco Bay High School, Miss Yuri.
Should I use this?
Yes.
This is working? Okay. Good evening. My name is Tiana Yuri, and I'll be delivering the State of the Student Address for Casco Bay High School. So as the trimester closes and the first snow coats the ground, Casco Bay becomes a very busy place. As an expeditionary learning school, we engage in subject-encompassing projects called expeditions. So this time of year is a period of development. Our freshmen are plunging into their first expedition, building community. They will be creating physical models and projects based on Portland neighborhoods that reflect the values of Portland's future vision. Currently, they are drafting individual proposals to the city for different action steps based on the city's comprehensive plan. Then they will meet and collaborate with each other, drafting 12 final pitches, which will be presented at City Hall on December 14th. Our sophomores are on the brink of culminating their own expedition, Africa Rising, where they research assets and needs of an African country and find local aid organizations to match its needs. After an extensive research process on the history of their country, they present a grant presentation for their chosen organization in front of a panel of experts, and the best group presenters are able to donate a collective $2,500 to their organization, fundraise for our Halloween dance. They'll be culminating this on Friday here at Casco Bay. Our juniors, however, are currently diving into our most rigorous of our 4 expeditions, so that's public policy. This year's theme is called Towards a More Perfect Union, where we will delve into the specifics of legislation and grapple with the divides that separate this nation. From green transportation to mass incarceration, the juniors are taking on important topics and will create a white paper research document as well as a presentation. They will propose their own public policies in their topics and present these policies in front of a panel of experts knowledgeable in the specific policies they studied. We're also laying the groundwork for our junior journey to Millinocket, where we will tell the stories of the region through documentary and mixed media. Our seniors, on the other hand, are presenting their museum at City Hall on Monday from 6 to 8. Their expedition focuses around the essential question, what is our moral obligation to Syria? While the culmination will take place Monday night, the exhibits will be on display for the next week after Thanksgiving as well. And I strongly suggest everyone to check it out because they're always really powerful and awesome. Aside from our expeditions, this Saturday, Casco Bay will be hosting an Arts and Music Fest where student performers and crafters will have their wares on sale, and the world's largest cookie walk will take place, which is very exciting. So be sure to check out Casco Bay from 10 to 2 this Saturday. We're also throwing an open house for 8th grade families on Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30, so if you have an 8th grader at home, be sure to come. And finally, we are preparing our march to the post office from the museum to City Hall at 1:30 on December 15th to celebrate college application submission. So everyone is invited to these events, and we're so excited to present our learning. Thank you.
Very exciting stuff. Thank you, Ms. Yuri. Report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This week, we celebrate American Education Week. During American Education Week, we spotlight the importance of providing every child in America with a quality public education. At a time when the threats on public schooling loom large, I'm grateful to the Portland community for their commitment to our public schools. I would start by recognizing Portland's voters for their overwhelming support of the forced school bond referendum. The vote was a reaffirmation of the work that so many people on this board and staff, parents, and elected officials have worked on for a long time. As we move forward, I pledge that we will work tirelessly to ensure that we complete the projects as quickly and efficiently as possible. I look forward to working with board members and others in realizing the vision for 21st century learning facilities across the city. I would also like to thank the Portland City Council for approving our supplemental budget last week. With that approval, we've concluded what has been a long and difficult budget process. I'm grateful to the council, but also to our finance committee, led by member Jenna Van Dill, for their effort to coordinate closely with the city on the supplemental budget effort. Among the important additions in this budget is our ability to meet the needs of the school-based health centers that were cut out of the state budget in July. With the supplemental budget, we will be able to fully support the clinics this year. I look forward to continuing to work with Greater Portland Health, the city, and our legislative delegation to make sure that we find a long-lasting solution for this important resource. At our last meeting, I spoke about our effort to launch our parent university. As you may recall, our launch was originally scheduled for November 4th but that was rescheduled to January 27th, to accommodate our guest speaker, noted Columbia University professor and researcher Amy Stewart Wells, who's the incoming president of the American Education Research Association. Dr. Wells' research is focused on diversity in schools and communities, and her findings indicate that exposure to diverse students is invaluable for both minority and non-minority students. As you know, part of our Portland Promise value proposition is that Portland Public Schools, as the state's most diverse school system, is one of the few places in Maine where we can fulfill the promise in Dr. Wells' research. She will be talking with us about her research and ways in which exposure to diverse students improves outcomes for all of our students. I hope that we will have a great turnout. I also want to plug the Portland Education Foundation's event at Bruno's on Monday, November 20th. This event is an opportunity for our community members, particularly those who live in the Deering Center, North and East Deering neighborhoods, to learn about the work of PF and how they can be involved in supporting our schools through the foundation. Finally, I would like to report on work that I'm doing in conjunction with staff and my colleagues in the Westbrook and South Portland school departments. As you know, the budget compromise approved in July, in that compromise, the state is promoting the idea of regional service centers. School districts are encouraged to form and join these centers. If school districts do not, they can lose significant dollars in the EPS allocation for district administration. Not joining a regional service center could cost the Portland Public Schools somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 in decreased revenue next year. As a district, we intend to submit a Part 1 application for a regional service center with our two neighbor districts. Part 1 applications are simply conceptual letters of intent. They're non-binding, and they're due by November 30th. Our proposal is evolving, but at this point focuses on 3 areas where we have been discussing collaboration prior to the advent of the regional service center requirements. Those areas are 1, transportation. Portland Public Schools, as the board knows, currently contracts with South Portland for fleet service and maintenance. Additionally, we have been in discussions about how to efficiently manage the combined fleets, how to deploy and route our buses, and how to train new bus drivers. Second area is around English language learner intake. All 3 districts have significant numbers of English language learners, and currently PPS has a very evolved student registration and intake system. We've been exploring ways in which we can maximize our resources by combining our efforts in this area. Not only could this be more efficient, but it would ensure consistent records whenever students move within the districts. And the third area is in recruiting and supporting diverse staff. As you know, PPS launched Teach Portland last summer. Both of our neighbor districts are also interested in recruiting and supporting diverse teacher candidates, and so this is an opportunity for us to work together to maximize our efforts. We've shared our preliminary plans with DOE staff, and they were supportive of our pursuits. The 3 superintendents and Assistant Superintendent Crocker will meet with Commissioner Bob Hassan next week to discuss these ideas further. As part of the Part 1 application, DOE will provide us, the 3 districts, with a facilitator to assist us in structuring the needed dialogue with stakeholders in the 3 districts and with the state. And they also provide an amount of money to support legal fees associated with any planning of a new entity for this purpose. The Part 2, sort of the final part of the application, is due in April, and prior to submitting a Part 2 application, the governing boards of all 3 districts would have to weigh in to approve the projects. So this is obviously just a very preliminary step, but one that seems necessary, appropriate, and wise, given the potential benefits arising from this partnership and the potential risks associated with not pursuing one. So I obviously would answer any questions that board members have about where we are with that partnership at this point. And otherwise, I would conclude my report.
Were there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your report. Moving on to report of the secretary. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of October 17th, 2017. Is there a motion? Ms. Seeliger, seconded by Ms. Thompson.
Can I comment?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to comment on the minutes. There are changes in the minutes that you received today from the ones that were in the packet earlier last week. The changes have to do with attendance at the meeting. There were some errors in that, and we also made some changes to the report that Ms. Thompson had made around the appointments committee. The minutes wrongfully reflected that we were dealing with the boundaries that affected East End, Hall, and Longfellow when close followers of this issue know that it's not Longfellow, but Ocean Avenue. So the minutes have been amended to reflect those changes, and so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Okay. Great. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, any board discussion? And seeing none, I would call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of October 17th, 2017, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. And we do not have report of the committees tonight, except that I wanted to ask Ms. Morioni to report on the MSMA conference.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A bit more prepared on this one. So thank you for the board for nominating me and electing me as your representative to the MSBA Delegate Assembly, which happened at the MSMA conference on October 26th and 27th. Instead of using acronyms, I'll say the MSMA stands for Maine School Management Association, and they have an annual conference each year. And then the MSBA is the Maine School Board Association, and they have a delegate assembly, which I was participating in. The other nice thing about this event for the conference, they had an incredible keynote speaker who spoke about student achievement, and he was from Illinois and gave a really great, it's called Let's Get Ready, presentation of what they do in their district. But I was also able to attend 3 of the breakout sessions during the day, and I just wanted to give the board sort of a general highlight of those, and I'll submit a report more in depth about those sessions. But the sessions that I did attend were, the first one was called We Belong Here, which School Equity in Maine. And this, sorry, I took it out of order, but that, I'll just, let me step back a minute. The first one that I attended was actually called Equity and Comparability, What It Will Take. And that was actually presented by Diane Doran, and she is the Maine Proficiency-Based Education Specialist for the Maine Department of Education. And that was a very, it was a working session where districts talked about, provided input on what is working well in their districts so far with the proficiency-based learning and teaching, and then also a thorough discussion, really in depth around what remains to be done as the state continues to design and refine the system of proficiency-based learning. So that was really a very interesting discussion and dynamic in terms of to see some districts who really had not done much at all the way to districts who seem to be working well with the proficiency-based grading and teaching. The next session that I attended was called We Belong Here, School Equity in Maine, and the presenters for that were the ACLU of Maine, and there actually is a report that they've compiled, which is We Belong Here, and Ms. Crocker and I attended that session together, and they divided us into 2 groups. And districts talked about what it is like in their own districts in terms of diversity and equity in their districts. And it was very, very fascinating, of course, because Portland being the most diverse of all the districts. But it was great to talk to other districts that may have one or two issues or topics that they wanted to reach out and talk to even districts like Portland about how we are helping students be more engaged and breaking down those barriers for having students feel like they belong. It was a great discussion. And so even Ms. Crocker and I felt as if that the ACLU of Maine, those presenters, it would be really wonderful to bring them here to Portland because we are included in that report. And I did bring, I don't have them with me, unfortunately, but we brought copies of that report for me to pass out to each of the board members at the future meeting. The third one that I attended was called You've Been Served. The full title, You've Been Served, and for board members. And that was actually presented by Melissa Huey of Drummond and Woodsum. And that was talking about the full title again, You've Been Served, School Board Members in Court. That was the title of it. And I wanted to attend that mostly because Melissa Huey's an amazing attorney, and she, again, represents our own school board. But most importantly, to understand what is it that could potentially get school boards in any type of litigation. And I have lots of information that she provided there in terms of ensuring that school board needs to make sure their type of insurance covers not only our general board work, but also us as individuals. So I gathered quite more information to share with board members with the litigation process, as well as insurance questions we should be asking of our own district staff. It was a full packed day, and unfortunately I was only able to stay there that one day. It did go on to that following Friday, but walking away from those, I feel like if in the future we're able to, as board members, block off those days so more than just one board member could go and attend, would be very, very useful because they had, at least 40 sessions or more that were very valuable, I think, to board members. So, yeah, that was my report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just point out that we brought the ACLU folks to speak to our principals at the last principal meeting, so it was great. It was really helpful, and we're glad to do that for the board as well.
Yeah, I think for the board and the community, it was very helpful and engaging to learn more also about their suggestions and recommendations. I thought were very good, and thank you for bringing it to the principals because that's where it's definitely needed. Thank you.
Thank you for representing us there. Moving into consent items, will the superintendent please read the consent items?
Yes, Madam Chair. Peaks Island School received the following donations: a set of silverware for use in the cafeteria to assist with their goal of being a green school from Dick McIntyre of Peaks Island, a durable waterproof sandwich board to advertise school events from Rachel Conley of Peaks Island, 5 blue tablecloths from Angela Perry of Cape Elizabeth, and an area rug for the 5th grade classroom from Priscilla Webster of Peaks Island. East End Community School received a bag of yarn and a bag of knitted hats and gloves from Southern Maine Area on Aging of Scarborough. Moore Middle School received a season's worth of drinks and snacks, as well as coolers and a table for their tennis team from the Home Depot in South Portland. Ocean Avenue Elementary School received school supplies from Let's Pay It Forward of Katona, New York. And Multilingual received 12 filled backpacks, classroom supplies, and a case of tissues and hand sanitizers from Cisco of Northern New England. Thank you to all of those organizations and people for their generous donations.
Thank you. And we have no old business tonight. Moving into new business, we have a couple of first reads. First read to adopt policy JB, transgender and gender expansive students, comprehensive plan goals, equity and whole student. And we have a first read to recommend the 2018 CIP project list and the 5-year CIP plan to the City Council. In personnel, we have administrative acknowledgements effective 11/14/17. Is
Can
there,
You don't need to move on it.
Okay.
So this is it's just an acknowledgement of a new person working for the Portland Public Schools. And I would like to formally, although I do not see her here, I would like to formally introduce Barrett Wilkinson, our equity coordinator. Barrett comes to us from the city of Portland, where they have coordinated the Portland Defending Childhood Grant. In that capacity, Barrett has become recognized as a knowledgeable advocate for student social emotional learning and equity. As equity coordinator, Barrett will have responsibility for supporting our cultural competence work alongside Barb Stoddard and launching our equity audit strategy, as well as supporting our affinity groups as part of our people strategy to attract and support diverse staff. So welcome to PPS, Barrett.
and that takes us into board focus on educational issues. We have a presentation on the transgender and gender expansion policy. And will the superintendent be introducing this item?
Yep. So today, as part of our board focus on educational issues, we will be presenting to the board about the proposed transgender and gender expansive student policy. This policy comes as a result of the USDOE's decision to reverse existing guidance to school districts about how to ensure that the needs of transgender and gender expansive students are met in school systems. When that guidance was withdrawn last spring, community and board members rallied to ensure that we as a school district committed to equity made clear our commitment to support our transgender and gender expansive students. Our equity goal states that PPS is vigilant in supporting each and every student's particular path to achieving high standards, rooting out systemic or ongoing inequities. And this policy is an effort to do just that. Over the past few months, under the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Jean Crocker and the Policy Committee, we've met with staff, advocates, and students to shape this policy, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Crocker to discuss key aspects of the policy.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Botana. I'm both honored and excited to have been a part of the process that has resulted in this exemplary policy for transgender and gender expansive students, and by extension, their families and our staff. Of course, the basis of all of our work is our Portland Promise. That's our foundation. Knocking down walls that stand between our students and their learning and their well-being. The Portland Promise is so closely connected to this particular policy in really every way. So if you consider our 4 goals: achievement, whole student, people, and equity. For example, strategy number 2 under equity: review current policies and practices that create unintentional barriers to access and move to dismantle them. Well, in this case, it was the absence of policy that needed to be addressed in order to remove barriers to access. So how did this policy come to be? As Superintendent Botana mentioned, there were federal guidelines in place that seemed to provide the information and support that was needed. And then when those federal guidelines were put aside, it became obvious to us through legal counsel and other ways that a policy was indeed necessary. We're delighted to have had this opportunity. We've created, I believe, an exemplar policy that will be used throughout the state and beyond by other school districts who will be using our policy as a model for their work. My thanks to the Policy Committee for their leadership, Chair Holly Seeliger and members Sarah Thompson and John Eder, who worked for 7 months to bring this policy to the board. Superintendent Botana has been deeply involved in the process all throughout. We're especially thankful for the assistance of the very best advisors we could ever have. And I hope I have not left anyone out, but when you start to name people, that's possible. So here I go. We had the expertise, both in person and electronically, of Mary Bonato and Polly Crozier from GLAD, based out of Boston, who are not able to join us this evening, but send their congratulations on this exceptional body of work. We had Gia Drew, right here from Equality Maine, and her intern, who attended several of our meetings to assist us. Our own legal counsel, obviously, Bruce Smith at Drummond Woodson, provided help all along the way. Many Portland Public Schools staff worked with the committee and attended many meetings, including some long meetings. And this is where I'm afraid I'm going to forget some names, but I'm going to give it a go. Isabel Weil, Reva Eiferman, Bob Carroll, board reps, going a little bit off of the staff line here for a minute, board reps Tiana Yuri and Fario Hassan. Students at Deering's GSA contributed by reviewing our draft, and parent Tim Atkinson, a huge contributor to the work. Oh, thank you. Melissa McStay. Melissa's going to speak to us tonight. How did I leave out your name? How did this policy come to be? I already did that part. Sorry. I'm thankful for those who have made it a priority to be with us this evening to share their perspective and to support the adoption of Portland's transgender and gender expansive policy. So, as would be fitting, having left out her name, I'm going to ask Melissa McStay to start us off, please. Melissa, if you'd come forward to the podium and share your thoughts. Melissa is social worker at Deering High School.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. So I am one of the social workers at Deering. I also have 2 students that are in the Portland Public Schools as well, of my own. So to begin, I would like to thank the school board for addressing this need and inviting those folks who live the work every day to the conversation in crafting the policy that supports and protects our students. Board members and administration have been open and eager to hear from the experts in the field, school staff who are on the front lines of support, parents, and our students. The careful consideration of some of the thorny issues has resulted in what I think is a thoughtful and proactive policy. I see this policy as part of our continuum of support for our students and, frankly, as a suicide and self-harm prevention measure. Our transgender and gender fluid youth are depending on the source at about a 41% rate of suicide attempts. Rates of self-harm behavior are also quite elevated. This statistic stems from the difficulty that can occur when you feel unaccepted, marginalized, or isolated. The policy that we're putting out before you is a message to our staff, youth, families, and community that they are accepted and will be supported. This can be life-saving. I believe in our district we have been mostly responsive to our transgender and gender fluid students, but sometimes this work can feel like you're out on a limb. It has been a place we've been happy to go because many of these students are on that limb. With this policy in place, staff will have the explicit support to do what is needed for our students. The required training that will come with this policy will enable staff to have the tools that are necessary. So I encourage you all to support this policy on behalf of our school communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
And I can introduce, well, we have others who are speaking.
Thank you. Chris Salamone, also social worker. Chris is at Ocean Ave Elementary School.
Good evening. My name is Chris Salamone. I've been a social worker in the Portland Public Schools for 18 years, and for the last 3 years I've been at Ocean Avenue. First, I want to give a resounding thank you to all of you who contributed to the formation of this exemplary policy. 2 years ago, I met one of the most courageous and inspiring students I'd ever worked with. An 8-year-old student, 3rd grade, walked into my office and told me that even though she was born in a male body, that she knew since the time she was 2 years old that she was a female, and she was ready to make a full transition. She told me she was scared beyond belief about how others might react, but she didn't want to go one more day pretending. She had told her parents, consulted with her doctor, and now she was ready to tell her friends. I couldn't have been more impressed with her poise and her confidence. Luckily, I work in a school district where everyone wanted to help this child feel safe and accepted. However, at that time, there was no district policy. We sought advice from many, but most we were led by the child and her family. I learned so much from them. I'm forever grateful. So many questions we grappled with: a bathroom policy, correct definitions and language, how to handle bullying, how to train staff and raise student-staff awareness are answered in this policy we're discussing tonight. Having had this policy then surely would have normalized the experience for this child and made her journey and ours a little less frightening. I hate to admit it, and I'm looking around the room here, but sad, I'm a little older than many of you here. Sadly, when I was growing up, gender identity and sexual orientation slurs were thrown around in locker rooms and playgrounds with regularity. I would like to think that the people who used those words knew the pain. If they knew the pain they were causing, they would have stopped. My first client, when I became a licensed social worker some 37 years ago, was a young man who was tormented by the growing realization that he was born in the wrong body. He regularly wanted to die. I don't need to tell you that the rate for depression and suicide among the LGBTQ community is astronomical. I recently lost somebody who I cared deeply about, a brilliant and talented young man who struggled for years to accept himself. Following his death, I promised myself that I would try to do my part to make this world a more tolerant place. Inclusive policies like these are a great start, and I thank you on his behalf.
Thank you, Chris. Next speaker is Gia Drew, Program Director for Equality Maine.
Good evening. Good evening, school board, Superintendent Botana, Assistant Superintendent Crocker. Thrilled to be here tonight. I don't want to take much of your time. I am Gia Drew. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Program Director for Equality Maine. Hopefully you know that Equality Maine has been advocating on behalf of the LGBTQ community for 33 years. We do that by providing education, building community, and advocating for policies and laws. So I was really thrilled months ago to be asked to join the policy committee to offer some input into the process to create this policy, historic policy. As many of you know or don't know, very few school districts in the state have any policy at all. I think there are less than 10 right now. And that's for all sorts of reasons. And so I know Superintendent Botana mentioned the federal guidelines that were pulled back recently, but I do want to point out a slight, or add some more information about that story so you have a fuller picture. So here in Maine, as many of you know, Maine amended the Maine Human Rights Act in 2005 to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as protected classes here in Maine, especially in terms of housing, education, employment, and public accommodations. That was really wonderful. And so that's many, many years ago. Unfortunately, the Department of Education never created guidelines to give to schools on how to interpret that law. And so schools have been making up and making decisions on their own. So across the state where I travel, it's a patchwork of policies, understandings, and commitments to supporting and embracing the LGBT community. And so as a former teacher of 20 years and a coach, and as a transgender person myself, I am heartened by the care and thoroughness that the committee went through to make this policy such a standard. And so I am thrilled to be here tonight to see this through to its completion. I urge you to pass it, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Gia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next to address us is Tim Atkinson, who attended, I believe, every single meeting of the policy committee in his role as parent. Tim, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. I think I did miss one meeting.
Well, it was just the short last one. I wasn't counting that one.
As Jeannie mentioned, it was a 7-month process. So I wanted to say thank you, and I'll use your first names since we were working so closely together. So to Jeannie, Javier, Holly, Sarah, and John, thank you all so much for digging deeply into the topics, and also to Gia and Polly and Mary from Equality Maine and GLAD for bringing their expertise, and to the staff counselors, advisors, social workers who shed light on the process and procedures that are currently in place in the schools, because that was a consideration as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about why this policy is so important, and share a couple of statistics from the National Transgender Discrimination Survey from 2015. 78% of the 1,876 respondents who expressed transgender identity or gender nonconformity in grades K to 12 reported harassment by students, teachers, or staff. So 78%. And many of the students experienced violence in the form of physical assault, 35%, sexual assault, 12%, expulsion, 6%. These experiences of mistreatment in schools correlated to lower income levels. Students were 50% less likely to earn $50,000 a year or more than the general population. For those who had to leave school due to harassment, nearly half, 48%, reported having experienced homelessness. Respondents who reported having to leave school due to harassment were also HIV positive at a rate of 5.14%, more than 8 times the HIV rate of the general population. So these are serious things, and it just, the bottom line is that supportive school environment is second only to a supportive family environment in determining outcomes for transgender and gender expansive students. Trans students have the same right to an excellent education that every other student in the district has. And with this policy, the board affirms that right and commits to following through on that sentiment with professional development so that school staff have the resources and training they need to follow through on that intent. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And finally, we're especially grateful to 2 Deering High School students who are willing to come forward together and to speak, Alex Fitzgerald and Izzy Smith.
Hello, I am Alexander Fitzgerald and this is Izzy Smith, and we are co-presidents of Deering High School's GSA, or Gender and Sexuality Alliance. We would like to thank everyone for having us here to speak tonight, because we were equally thrilled to have the opportunity to look over the policy and give a student perspective on it. And we wanted to share some of our thoughts from that reading with multiple GSA members. As LGBT students, we wanted to say that this policy is important to us because it requires that teachers receive regular training to help them interact with students and also feel better equipped. We have had multiple occasions that we've heard of from our LGBT friends in school who have had experienced harassment or negative encounters with staff or other students, and when reporting it to staff, it wasn't always known how to handle it. So we feel like staff receiving regular training will help make those, obviously will make those interactions less frequent, but also handled properly and taken to the right places and addressed. We also really appreciated that respecting students' identities is the first priority, and confidentiality and privacy in reference to students' identities when required and requested by student in reference to other students, staff, and even their own family. We also appreciated the notation of the school avoiding gender segregated facilities or activities unless they serve an educational process, because this can leave gender questioning or transgender students kind of by the wayside when they are separated, asked to separate themselves into just girls and boys. And that the dress code be gender neutral. We really appreciate that it included a stable set of definitions so people would feel more comfortable with the vocabulary. And we feel that the outcome will be making our schools more safer and helping students feel more comfortable, which makes them more likely to succeed. We are seniors. We have been LGBT students in Deering High School for 4 years. And I myself, as a transgender student, at home, my identity is at best occasionally noted and respected. And I've had a really good experience with staff members going to as far as to catch me in the hall and take a 5-minute walk with me to apologize for misgendering me when I didn't even notice. And I just feel like this policy is a step forward in representing the kindness that this district has in it, and also helping other students like me receive as good of a treatment as I did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to all of our speakers this evening, we are most appreciative. Our next steps include action by the board at the November 28th meeting. We will then, assuming passage, share the policy broadly throughout the district so that all are aware of its existence and the benefits it ensures. And professional development for staff, as just mentioned, will be timely and ongoing.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions or comments regarding this item at this time?
I'd like to speak for a second on this. So it's my first year as a chair of a committee, and I just couldn't be more proud of all the community involvement, student involvement, and I was a former GSA student when I was in high school, and just really happy to see the progress that Portland is taking, and I think it's a model policy for other districts, the rest of the state, and just thankful to everyone. You know, we had amazing community involvement and people coming to our meetings, and that meant the world to me. So I look forward to hopefully passing it with the board at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seeliger, and thank you again for your work and for the policy committee, and for all of those that came out this evening and stuck with us to tell your stories and add your support for this. I know that this has been a big commitment, both from the policy committee and for the board over the last year. We've really wanted to make this policy happen. Some of the statistics cited tonight are just unconscionable, and so I'm glad that we can, as a district, be taking this step to put forward something that can hopefully be a model to other districts. So thank you all, and we look forward to moving forward on this. So that concludes the board focus on educational issues. Where it is before the hour of 10 o'clock, we would take public comment on any items not on this evening's agenda. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I would close public comment, and before I call for adjournment, I would just note that we do have 2 workshops following this meeting. One is on the CIP, and the next one is on fair contracting. And with that, I would call for a motion for adjournment. Ms. Davis, seconded by Mr. Eder. All those in favor? It's unanimous with the students in the affirmative, and we are adjourned.